What began with early experiments in Imperial Russia evolved into a powerful Soviet legacy and continues today in modern Russia. This is a journey through over a century of Russian and Soviet tank development, from the First World War designs to today's machines. We start our list with Imperial Russia, World War I. Vizdyad, meaning go anywhere. This bizarre early design was one of the first attempts at an all-terrain fighting vehicle. It utilized a single wide rubber track and two small wheels for steering. Though visionary, it never moved past the experimental stage. Tsar tank. Looking more like a giant tricycle than a tank, this monster featured massive front wheels nearly 9 meters high. It was designed to crush any obstacle in its path, but, ironically, its small rear wheel got stuck in the mud during its first test and never moved again. The next one, Mendeleev tank. A massive land ship concept that was decades ahead of its time. It featured heavy armor and a massive naval gun. The design was so incredibly heavy that it required specialized railway wheels just to be transported to the front lines. Moving on to interwar period, Ruski Renault. This was the first tank ever produced in Soviet Russia. A direct bolt-for-bolt copy, the famous French Renault FT. It proved that the young nation possessed the industrial might to manufacture its own complex armored fighting vehicles. T-18, also known as the MS-1, this was the first mass-produced Soviet tank design. Though small and agile, it was the grandfather of the Soviet Armored Corps, serving as the primary training tool for a generation of early tank crews. Up next, T-12, T-24. These were the Soviets' first steps into medium tank design. While the T-12 was plagued by mechanical failures, the follow-up, T-24, featured a main gun and a machine gun in separate turrets. Ultimately, only a handful were ever built. T-27, a pint-sized tankette based on a British Carden-Loyd design. Intended for scouting and infantry support, it lacked rotating turret and was famously cramped. Despite its flaws, its simple design allowed for massive production numbers. T-36. This light tank became the true backbone of Soviet armor in the 1930s. Based on the British Vickers design, it was versatile and reliable, seeing heavy combat in Spain and the Far East long before the start of World War II. BT-2, built for blistering speed. This was the first of the Fast Tank series. It utilized a unique Christie suspension that allowed it to drive on tracks or shed them to zip along on its wheels. It could literally fly across the battlefield. The next one, BT-5, a lethal evolution of the high-speed tank concept. It featured an enlarged turret and a powerful 45mm gun. For its time, it was a dangerous predator, capable of outrunning and outgunning almost any other light tank on Earth. T-37A. This was the world's first mass-produced amphibious tank. Equipped with a small propeller and a rudder, it could navigate lakes and rivers with ease. It gave Soviet scouts a massive advantage in the marshy terrain of Eastern Europe. Then, T-28. A multi-turreted medium tank designed to punch holes through enemy defensive lines. While its 3 turrets gave it impressive firepower in multiple directions, the complex layout was a nightmare for commanders to coordinate in the heat of battle. T-35, the ultimate land battleship featuring 5 independent turrets. It was a massive propaganda icon, designed to showcase Soviet industrial power. In actual combat, however, it was far too slow and mechanically fragile for modern, fast-moving warfare. T-29, an experimental attempt to marry the heavy firepower of the T-28 medium tank with the high-speed Christie suspension. It aimed to create a universal tank that was both powerful and fast. But the design proved too complex for mass production. BT-7, the final and most refined version of the high-speed BT series. It featured sloped armor and a high-performance engine, making it a favorite among crews. It remained a frontline threat well into the early years of the Great Patriotic War. Then, T-46, an ambitious project meant to replace the aging T-26 light tank fleet. It attempted to combine a high-speed suspension with the traditional light tank layout. Unfortunately, the design was deemed too expensive and complex for the Red Army's needs. T-38, an improved amphibious scout designed to be wider and more stable in the water than its predecessor. Although its armor was paper-thin, it was an indispensable tool for crossing water obstacles and conducting silent reconnaissance behind enemy lines. USMK, a giant, heavy tank featuring 2 turrets stacked at different heights. It was built to replace the aging T-35. However, testing during the war with Finland proved that a single turret design was far more efficient and less cumbersome. Then, T-100, a twin-torrented rival to the SNK heavy tank. It was heavily armored and physically imposing. Like its competitor, it served as a lesson to Soviet engineers that multi-turret designs were too heavy, too tall, and too difficult to manage. Now let's look at World War II. T-40, the final amphibious light tank developed before the German invasion. It was better protected and more seaworthy than earlier models. Most were pressed into service as regular land tanks during the desperate defense of the Soviet Union in 1941. Then KV-1, a legendary heavy tank that was virtually invincible when it first appeared. Its thick steel plating could shrug off almost every anti-tank gun the Germans possessed. It became a terrifying symbol of Soviet defiance during the early war. Now this is the T-30, a simplified, non-amphibious version of the T-40 Scout tank. By removing the expensive swimming equipment, factories could build them faster during the wartime emergency. It served as a vital light support vehicle during the defense of Moscow. The next one, T-34, arguably the most influential tank in history. It combined revolutionary sloped armor with a high-velocity gun and wide tracks. This perfect balance of mobility, protection, and firepower forced the enemy to rethink their entire approach to tank design. KV-2, a terrifying sight on the battlefield, defined by its massive, boxy turret. It carried a giant 152mm howitzer designed to pulverize concrete bunkers. It was a slow-moving giant that could destroy any target with a single blast. T-150, an experimental variant of the KV-1, featuring even thicker armor and a supercharged engine. It was an engineering test to see how much weight the chassis could handle. The lone prototype was actually sent to the front to fight for Leningrad. KV-220, a heavy tank prototype featuring an elongated hull and a massive turret armed with an 85mm gun. It was intended to be a super heavy breakthrough vehicle, but the design was eventually sidelined in favor of more practical heavy tanks. Now this is the T-50, a highly advanced light tank that was truly ahead of its time. It featured excellent sloped armor and a 3-man turret. While it was arguably the best light tank of the war, it was too expensive to build in the necessary numbers. T-60, a small, economical scout tank born of desperation. It was designed to use civilian truck engines and parts to keep production moving while major factories were being evacuated. It played a crucial role during the darkest days of 1941. Then KV-8, a heavy flamethrower tank designed for psychological warfare. It was cleverly disguised to look like a standard KV-1 to lure the enemy into close range. It was a horrifying weapon used to incinerate bunkers and entrenched infantry positions. T-34-57, a specialized tank hunter version of the famous T-34. It was fitted with a long-barreled, high-velocity 57mm gun. This exterminator could penetrate heavy enemy armor from distances that standard tanks simply couldn't match. KV-13, an experimental project to create a universal tank by merging the protection of a heavy tank with the speed of a medium tank. While the project itself didn't enter production, the research paved the way for the legendary 1S series. T-70, the most widely used Soviet light tank of the mid-war period. It featured improved armor and reliability over earlier scouts. It was frequently used for reconnaissance and supporting infantry during the massive flanking maneuvers of 1943. T-43, a proposed successor to the T-34 that focused on significantly thicker armor protection. While a solid design, it was ultimately rejected because the military decided that upgrading the existing T-34 with a larger gun was more efficient for the war effort. T-80, light tank. Not to be confused with the later main battle tank, this was the final evolution of the wartime light tank. It featured a 2-man turret, finally relieving the commander of the duty of loading the gun, though production was cut short. The next one, IS-1, the first of the Joseph Stalin heavy tanks, built to succeed the aging KV line. It featured a newly designed hull and a turret armed with an 85mm gun, specifically intended to knock out the newest German heavy armor. IS-2, a true heavyweight champion, armed with a massive 122mm gun. It was designed for one purpose: smashing through the thickest concrete and steel. It was the ultimate breakthrough weapon of the Soviets' final drive to Berlin. IA-X, an experimental heavy tank that tested a cutting-edge electric transmission system. It featured a sleek, highly sloped hull for maximum protection. However, the complex transmission proved unreliable, and the project was abandoned for more conventional designs. T-44, a revolutionary medium tank that bridged the gap between the T-34 and the Cold War era. By mounting the engine sideways, designers created a very low, compact profile. It set the design blueprint for almost every Soviet tank that followed. IS-3, distinguishable by its iconic pike nose armor. This heavy tank sent shock waves through the West when it appeared at the end of the war. Its extreme armor angles provided incredible protection, making it look like a machine from the future. Now let's look at early Cold War. IS-4, an incredibly heavy and thick-skinned beast, designed for maximum survival on the battlefield. While almost impossible to destroy, it was too heavy for most bridges and roads. It had a brief, difficult career before being moved to the reserves. T-54, the first version of what would become the most produced tank in human history. Armed with a powerful 100mm gun and a tough, hemispherical turret, it became the standard-bearer for Soviet armored might during the early Cold War. The next one, IS-7 Object 260, the heaviest and most powerful of all the Stalin tanks. It carried a massive 130mm naval gun and was shielded by incredible armor. It was an absolute monster, but simply too heavy for the Soviet logistics of the time. Now this is the K-90, an experimental amphibious light tank from the early Cold War era. It was designed to replace aging Scout models with improved mobility and better performance in the water. Its development helped refine the tech used in later mass-produced amphibious tanks. PT-76, the standard Soviet amphibious tank for decades. It was exceptionally capable in the water and saw service in conflicts all over the globe. Its lightweight made it the perfect tool for naval landings and lightning-fast river crossings. Next, Object 416, a bizarre-looking experimental tank with an incredibly low profile. To keep the vehicle as short as possible, the entire crew, including the driver, was located inside the turret. It was designed to be almost impossible to hit on the battlefield. T-10, originally designated the 1S-8, this was the final heavy tank to ever enter Soviet service. Long and powerful, it was designed to support faster medium tanks. Its retirement marked the end of the heavy tank era in favor of main battle tanks. Object 140, an advanced prototype developed during the hunt for a new medium tank. It featured many complex new technologies for its time. Ultimately, its rival was chosen for production because it was simpler, more reliable, and easier to manufacture. T-55, an upgrade to the legendary T-54, adding full protection against nuclear, biological, and chemical threats. It became a global icon, serving in dozens of countries and gaining a reputation for extreme reliability and ease of maintenance. Object 430. This experimental vehicle was the first step toward a revolutionary new generation of armored warfare. It focused on making the tank as small and compact as possible. Its radical development led directly to the game-changing T-64, Object 277, a high-tech heavy tank project that utilized an incredibly powerful engine and a massive gun. It was intended to be the ultimate breakthrough machine for the nuclear age. However, the rising popularity of anti-tank missiles made heavy tanks obsolete. Object 279, one of the most unique tanks ever built, featuring 4 tracks and a UFO-shaped hull. It was designed to survive the shockwave of a nuclear blast without flipping over. It could also cross swampy terrain that would stop any other vehicle. Then, Object 770, an advanced heavy tank prototype that focused on crew comfort and handling. It featured a powerful engine and a smooth automatic transmission. It was a very modern design that unfortunately never reached production as the heavy tank era ended. Next on the list is late Cold War. Object 906, an experimental amphibious light tank armed with a long 85mm gun. It was significantly more powerful than standard Scouts of the era. It helped pave the way for future airborne fighting vehicles like the BMD series. Up next, T-62. This tank introduced the world's first smoothbore gun on a mass-produced vehicle. It was designed to fire high-velocity shells that could punch through the thickest armor of the time. It remained a staple of Soviet-aligned armies for decades. Object 167, an experimental upgrade to the T-62 that tested a new suspension system and a much more powerful engine. While it performed exceptionally well, the Soviet military decided to focus on more radical new designs instead, like the T-64. Object 432, T-64. A revolutionary design that changed armored warfare forever. It introduced composite armor and an automatic loader, allowing for a smaller three-man crew. It was far more advanced than any Western tank when it first appeared. Up next, Object 287, an experimental missile tank built on a modernized chassis. It lacked a traditional gun and relied entirely on guided missiles to engage the enemy. It proved the potential of missiles, but also highlighted the limitations of not having a cannon. Object 434, T-64A. This was the definitive version that brought the massive 125mm smoothbore gun to the front lines. It set the lethality standard for Soviet main battle tanks for the remainder of the Cold War. IT-1, a dedicated missile tank that saw limited service. It featured a pop-up launcher that fired heavy guided missiles at long ranges. It was a specialized hunter designed to destroy enemy armor from safety before they could even return fire. Object 219. The experimental prototype used to test a powerful gas turbine engine in a tank chassis. It was incredibly fast and could start instantly in sub-zero temperatures. This research led directly to the birth of the T-80 main battle tank. T-72, designed to be the reliable, mass-produced workhorse of the Soviet Union. It was simpler and more cost-effective than the high-tech T-64. It became one of the most widely used and recognizable tanks in the history of warfare. Object 685, a highly advanced light tank designed specifically for airborne troops. It was amphibious and carried a surprisingly powerful gun for its light weight. Though never produced, its design influenced several future vehicles, including the BMP-3. The next one, Object 934, another airborne light tank contender with a very low weight and high top speed. It was built to be dropped from cargo planes to provide immediate fire support for paratroopers. It was a sophisticated machine that refined the airborne tank concept, T-80 MBT, a high-performance main battle tank powered by a roaring gas turbine engine. Designed for rapid, high-speed breakthroughs, it was the elite choice for Soviet forces stationed in Eastern Europe during the final years of the Cold War. Object 477, a radical experimental tank often called the Boxer. It featured an unmanned turret and an incredibly powerful gun. It was intended to be a futuristic leap in design that could dominate any NATO tank on the modern battlefield. Object 490, one of the most extreme tank designs ever proposed, featuring an unusual layout with ultra-high levels of protection for the crew. With its unique silhouette and advanced systems, it looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Up next, Object 187, an advanced prototype meant to push the T-72 design to its absolute limit. It featured a redesigned hull and a much more powerful engine. It was a highly capable tank that showed just how much potential the old chassis still had. Object 292. This experimental beast was a T-80 chassis fitted with a massive 152mm gun. It was built to test if such a giant weapon could be effectively handled by a standard tank hull to counter new Western threats. Finishing off with post-Soviet era. Object 299. More than just a tank. This was a project for a universal heavy platform. It was intended to be the base for everything, from main battle tanks to engineering vehicles and heavy troop carriers in a unified armored force. T-90, a successful blend of the battle-proven T-72 hull and the advanced electronic systems of the T-80. It was the primary tank for the Russian Army throughout the 1990s and remains a highly popular and capable export tank today. Now this is the Object 640 Black Eagle, a striking prototype with a very long turret and an external ammunition compartment. It was designed to keep the crew much safer by moving shells outside the main hull. It looked incredibly aggressive and modern for its time. Object 195, T-95, a monster of a tank that utilized an unmanned turret and a giant 152mm gun. It was meant to be the ultimate armored vehicle of the 21st century. Though not produced, its DNA lives on in the Armata T-90A, an upgraded version of the Russian main battle tank featuring a new welded turret and a more powerful engine. It also included advanced thermal sights, making it a much more dangerous and precise opponent during night combat operations. 2S-25 Sprute SD, a unique airborne tank destroyer that can be dropped onto the battlefield by parachute. It carries the same powerful gun as a full-size tank, but on a much lighter chassis. giving paratroopers the heavy firepower they desperately need. Then, T-14 Armata. This represents a massive leap in modern armored design. It features a fully unmanned turret and keeps the three-man crew in a reinforced armored capsule for maximum safety. It is packed with the world's latest active defensive technology, T-90M, the latest and most advanced version of the T-90. It features significantly improved modular armor and a completely new turret layout. It is currently the most modern and capable tank in active service with the Russian Army. Now this is the Tu-S25M Sprut SDM-1, the modernized version of the airborne tank destroyer, featuring improved fire control systems and better mobility. It remains one of the few vehicles in the world that combines heavy tank firepower with the agility of an airborne scout.